Hi.
Hello.
Thanks for coming. Can you introduce yourself a little bit?
I'm Ira Tiffen. I'm the Vice President of the Motion Picture and Television Filter Division at Schneider Optics.
Do you think the tendency to overlook filters is a more modern problem now that we have digital and that kind of stuff? Were filters more commonplace during film, or has it always been kind of like almost an afterthought or lack of education?
That's actually a very good way of phrasing that question. It is an issue that I address time to time in the various seminars that I've done, because for the most part, filters are learned later in your learning experience, in your education, becoming a cinematographer or even a still photographer. And the reason for that is you need a camera, you need a lens, you need to understand how those work. When you've done all you can with that, and you still want more, that's when you seek out filters. Filters are an aspect of the art and emotional content and the ability to manipulate light content, as well as the technical issues, which you would need to know just in understanding T-stops, for instance, or focal lengths, understanding filters, and as such, all of that serves to make an individual cameraman more competitive the more he learns and the better he gets at employing the tools that are there. And filters are something that should not be overlooked when you gauge the universe of tools for doing this, because there's nothing more powerful than that slim piece of glass in being able to do something with everything else that you're doing, all else being the same, and turn it from something mundane to something magnificent and memorable.
Speaking of, what are some of your favorite uses of filters in movies? Do you have favorite movies that use filters in a creative way, or?
I like the first few minutes of Top Gun. The ability Jeff Kimball put into building up the drama and the level of energy was brilliant, in my opinion. Starts off underexposed, it's dark, to suggest it's just barely sun up. But it's enough to see. And he played around with color and with graduated color. And there's oranges and reds and yellows and things that you normally wouldn't see, but they fit in perfectly. With the background music, which really wasn't background, it was almost the star of this sequence. Boy, are you introduced to a new world instantly by what he did. And when that color was put in there, it looked ingenious, because it's the kind of color that signaled to you that this was no ordinary location, this was no ordinary time. This was something that was really adventurous and exciting. And I probably saw that several times before I thought of the color, because it worked its way into the story so seamlessly that even me, who you would expect to be sensitive and sensitized to seeing this kind of thing, hadn't thought of it as a filter effect until long after I had seen it. And I said, you know what? That was wonderful. But even I didn't realize it. The idea being that when filters are used at their best levels, typically, it's not something that you're sitting there saying, yeah, they used a filter for that. You want it to blend in so that it doesn't draw attention to itself and that it just feels right. There are a lot of technical applications for filters that are there to help you get proper exposure, to control depth of field, that allow you to manipulate certain elements of the scene, like reflections off of windows. This one instance was beyond that. It was just something that you had to be familiar with the capability of color and light and understand just how things feel. And so that was an excellent example to me of just feel right use of filters.
There's so many filters. There's so many filters out there. What are the top 5 that you think that you would want to keep with you?
The range of filters can certainly be bewildering, can it?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the key obstacles to people putting their foot in the filter water and saying, let me try this out and see what it's like. So I will give what I consider to be the most important 5 filters. I would start with a very basic concept, and that is that if you're shooting anything where something might get tossed at your lens, whatever it is, could be rain, sand, mud, whatever, the idea is you don't want to damage that front element of your lens, because replacing it's expensive, time-consuming, and if you can avoid it easily, use a clear filter. Clear filter for protection, they have traditionally been the most popular filter type. It's just basic common sense. If you do anything outdoors, anything at all, polarizers are really, really useful. There's a lot you can do with polarizers. They have, if you understand how they work, the ability to do things you can't do digitally that you would really enjoy being able to do. Polarizers are famous for deepening a blue sky. You want to deepen a blue sky? Michael Slovis in Breaking Bad used this many times using our True Pol, which has a very high polarization efficiency, which made the effect even more dramatic when he would create this deep dark band in the sky that it wasn't natural, but it created this palpable sense of tension and menace in the scene that he used these on that you could not have obtained readily otherwise. And it fit the story so well because you had warring factions meeting on the desert. Without that deep dark sky where it was, the actors would not have stood out so prominently and so powerfully. And the otherwise, normally to the eye, clear blue would not have had that drama that the filter imparted into it. You can darken it in post, but you will be missing some of the detail. You may incorporate some noise, which, by the way, is another reason to use an optical solution for manipulating the image as opposed to leaving it all in post, because more post manipulation typically incorporates some digital artifacts, in particular noise, that could be objectionable and further limits your ability. As you use it to fix certain things, it diminishes your latitude and range in doing other things. So that if you've done it with an optical approach like a filter, you get an image that's going to be much more dramatic and very difficult to replicate afterwards in post. Beyond that is diffusion. The idea of diffusion has to do with 3 key things. You're dealing with sharpness above all, the ability to resolve fine details. And so when you don't want to see the pores on the actor's skin or wrinkles and blemishes, but yet you still want the image to appear in focus, that's a key thing. It wasn't always the case. You need diffusion. Looking to tone down harsh contrast. Black is too black, white is too white, and you want to manipulate that. And then there's a certain degree of halation, of highlight flare, when you see a glow around a brighter area versus a darker area.
War of the Worlds, I believe it was David Mullen. He used a pretty heavy diffusion filter to make almost every single highlight bloom a lot more, and it kind of gave this futuristic, cold, otherworldly feel. It was a really interesting effect because it's so noticeable, but because of the tone of the film, it just kind of worked.
It fit right in.
Yeah.
I would suggest you take a look at what's out there. I won't tell you should use this one or that one because there's differences, and I can't say which of those would be more useful to any one individual. It's going to depend on, really, it's up to a matter of choice, of preference.
Yeah.
And so a diffusion filter, something.
What's next on your list?
I think that graduated neutral density is very important, and neutral densities are very important. The neutral density is important, especially now, because digital sensors have very high sensitivity to light, have what we would call high film speed equivalent. And working with filters to take out all the light evenly through the spectrum as neutral density filters are designed to do. When you are trying to direct the attention of the audience to a certain item in the scene, a certain part of the scene, you can do so by putting the foreground and the background out of focus relative to that object so that all the other distracting detail is soft and diffused and not attracting attention to itself. You need to adjust the diaphragm, the iris opening, to control depth of field to be able to create that effect. That you can then say, all right, I can set the t-stop where I want it to get the effect from this lens, the performance level of this lens that I want. And then I can play around with neutral density filters to get the right exposure. Now we need a fifth filter. And I would suggest one that's unique to Schneider, which is the Digicon. What that's capable of doing is enhancing the dynamic range of your camera, whatever that happens to be to start with. It has the ability to bring more of the real world into the range that your camera is capable of rendering. And so you can capture upwards of 1.5 to 2 stops of additional dynamic range in many circumstances, which would otherwise be lost. And so when you're trying to bring more of the real world in, the Digicon is a particularly effective way of doing that. Those would be the 5 filters I would want to have with me and that I would suggest people take a closer look at as they get started. Again, keep it simple. Look at the first major need that you might have. Start with one and then move on from there.
So start with your story and what you want to tell, and then
Definitely.
that's a lot less intimidating. That's good. What are you excited about in terms of the future of filter technology and the way that the industry is headed and the way cameras and lighting are heading? Because it just seems to be changing minute to minute almost.
I've been doing this a long time. And what I'm excited about is the fact that I'm still, after all these years, excited about what I'm doing. The reason, apart from any personal bias that I might have, is that filters are still relevant. The things that I know and that I've done and that I intend to do are still of importance out there, and that's remarkable. There's no guarantee that that was ever going to be the case when I first got into it. In fact, back in the 70s, it looked like it might be possible when the advent of affordable home video recorders, camcorders, came out, that people could just dial in the color and contrast that they wanted. They might not need filters, but that didn't happen. In fact, there was an increased need for filters. And so even with all the digital manipulation that exists today, there is still, I believe, an even more importance associated with filters than ever, because there are elements of the cameraman retaining control that were not quite as strong as they are today in the past. And there are elements of manipulating that image that are even more important now, because you do have the ability to shoot in the dark. You do have the ability to record a broader range of a dynamic range, and yet it's still not all that you can do. You still need some other means of taking what a camera and a lens and a light can do and turning it into magic, and filters will help you do that. It turns things into magic.